Hello, once again, Niner Faithful, and welcome back to another episode of the JFA podcast. I almost said 49ers Playbook like I do on all my weekly reviews. I'm not used to bringing in the intro on these podcasts. Normally, that's Adam. He's the co-host. Many of you know Adam so well. Adam could not join us today. He is car shopping. Apparently, his car has been giving him lots of problems, so he is out there looking for a new car. Couldn't make it in this morning, but I do have an amazing special guest with us, Jason Hurley. We're going to dive into the 49ers salary cap, free agency outlook. I mean, Monday's the day, so we'll see what happens. Do the 49ers make a big splash? And they also just hired a new offensive coach. So we're going to dive into all this and more. You're inside the Johnny Dell Football Academy. Well, hello once again, Niner Faithful. Good to see so many people in the chat. So many of the regulars, you know what to do. You are already popping. If you are here, just pop in a hashtag JD49 in the chat. Helps us juice the algorithm. It's a free way you can support the channel and help us to reach more amazing 49ers fans just like yourself. We have Leon is in here. Marcos is in here. Dr. Steve is in here. Third and Three is in here. So many of the good people that are there, and more are trickling in as they're getting the notifications that we are live. And you obviously, if you're here in the chat, that you have gotten the notifications, you have your notifications turned on. You are subscribed to the channel, and you have allowed YouTube notifications probably on your phone, I'm guessing. For everybody, that's how I get mine. That's how I know when John Chapman goes live. That's how I know when Wayne Breezy goes live, Steph goes live, Eric Crocker, all those amazing content creators that are out there doing some great work. That's how I know all of them are live, is because I'm subscribed to their channel. I have the notifications turned on, and I've allowed YouTube notifications, so you'll be alerted to when we go live. We try and go live every Monday and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern time, 7 a.m. Pacific time. We're going to be your good morning football for the Niners. So, with all that being said, welcome in to Mr. Jason Hurley. He is the 49ers cap guru. Welcome in, Jason. How you doing?
Doing good today, Johnny. How you doing?
You know, I'm doing okay. I got some coffee. It's a gray, rainy day here in Alabama. It reminds me of Washington. I lived in Washington for a lot of years, grew up in Oregon, and it's reminding me of that. It's just rain outside. I'm hearing the sound of the rain outside my wall here. Big hello to the beautiful Dawn Dell. That's my wife. She's there in the chat. She supports the channel. Be like my wife and hit hashtag JD49 in the chat. But doing pretty well. You know, I've mostly, I think, recovered from the Super Bowl. I think going in, I was sitting here, I was sitting there, I'd almost resolved myself to the fact that I was just going to appreciate the season for what it was this year. The last two times we'd been in the Super Bowl before, I allowed it to get to me way too much. I mean, I'm a diehard fan. It's what we live for. But I was in a funk for a long time. Maybe it's the fact that this time around I have 3 kids, and I was sitting there going, you know, I can't really let this affect me as a dad to my kids. My kids did not do anything wrong to me. The 49ers did. You know, because like my wife, she's in the chat. She can attest. She was worried about me after the 2012 Super Bowl. Like I was in a bad place for about 3 weeks after that. Then the 2019 Super Bowl, I was in a bad way for a couple weeks. This one, it took a couple days of mourning, and then I kind of moved forward. But we were talking right before the show that, you know, this one hurt in the sense that it felt like if any year was gonna be our year, this was it. If there was any year to take advantage of the Chiefs and their offense, that this was that year. And not being able to, you know, win the Lombardi this year feels like, okay, if we couldn't do it this year, it's going to be even harder going forward. I think that's the harder thing for me, is going, okay, are we gonna win one before I'm dead? You know, like I don't have, I'm 39. Are they going to go and are they going to win one within the next 40 years? I don't know. It's hard to not go to that kind of a place. But how about you? 2019, 2012, 2023. How do you feel about the Super Bowl? Like, which one hurts worse?
This year's does. Because it felt like we were, I don't want to say destined, but it felt like our year, finally. Everything was going right. We didn't have many injuries. And then ran into problem after problem with Green Bay and Detroit having to come back, which I'm proud of those comeback wins. And then the Super Bowl comes and it's just heartbreaking.
I think the thing that I struggled with this entire season was that it felt like as dominant as the team was for some stretches. I mean, they were dominant for some stretches. Went 5 and 6 games at a time where they were winning by an average of 19 points per game. I mean, that's bananas. Even with that, it felt like in so many games they still did not live up to potential. It just felt like there was something a little bit off throughout much of the season, that they just weren't quite clicking. And every year people talk about that team down the stretch that gets hot at the end. It felt like the 49ers never really got hot. Like,
no.
I think the only 2 games where it really felt like that, and really not even the second one, but the Dallas game. It felt like the Dallas game was that should have been how they played every game this year. That team that could do what they did to Dallas, in that the defense being absolutely suffocating, the offense being unstoppable. That's what it felt like every single game should have been like. But so many games didn't feel like that, and it just felt like that there was just something a little off. And it's frustrating when you look at it because it's hard to pin down. You say, is this a Shanahan problem? Is this, some other coaching staff problem? Is this a player problem? Somewhere in there, just they weren't jiving, and it wasn't like, when you look at the Chiefs, they were having issues all season long. I mean, having Kelce with, looking like he's got CTE problems. I'm not trying to make light of that, but I mean, he's losing it on the sidelines, destroying helmets. Andy Reid is getting into it with him there. You have Patrick Mahomes losing his stuff at different games, and you got all these offensive problems with players running wrong routes and just not executing well. But their defense there at the end of the year was so stinking good and just gelled and got so hot that you knew it was going to be a fight. And then our defense on the other side was struggling. And, I've gone back and forth, I think, as times of looking at it and thinking, okay, yeah, the offense should have done a lot more in that game. This was a really, really good offense. But I'm also sitting there thinking, okay, which offense can I excuse a little bit more there? The 15th ranked offense against the number 3 ranked defense, or the number 3 ranked offense versus the number 1 ranked defense. As far as scoring, I think that Chiefs defense. If one of those defenses or offenses I was out there looking at, I'd say, I think you would expect the Chiefs offense to struggle more than they did in that second half.
Yeah.
You knew that Kansas City was going to hold San Francisco for a few stretches there. You knew it was going to happen in the game at some point. They've done it to every single team this year. They had taken every single offense across the league, and they had held them to multiple series without converting a first down. So you knew that was going to happen at some point. When that happened, you knew, though, that the defense was going to have to really step up and do something. Now, they did for a little while, but then down there at the stretch, just, man. And then Kyle Williams, the ghost of Kyle Williams gets us again.
Yeah.
But
with McLeod.
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't on McLeod. I mean,
No, it
that was
was
a great thing. I mean, it bounced off Daryl Luter's foot.
yeah.
But we're moving on. This is, one thing I love about the when free agency kicks off is it's like it's finally it's really that moment where you close the page, you turn the page, you close the door on the previous season. It is done. The team that was here last year is not going to be the same team that you will have next year. It's like the official, and things start happening, and it's set in stone now. Okay, this is a new year. This is a new team. So that's the only reason I bring up the Super Bowl, is to look at that and say, okay, we are closing that down. People, Bill, I'm going to tell you, I'm not doing a Super Bowl breakdown. I've had some people, a few people ask about that. There's a few things here. One, I am not strong enough mentally to be able to go through that and not let it affect me. I did a few plays here after Steve Wilkes was fired, and that was getting my blood pressure up. I was getting a little irritated, and because people have asked me this every year, and I had somebody ask me in the comments recently. They were like, you don't cover the losses. You didn't do the Super Bowl loss or the Christmas Day loss to the Ravens, and you didn't cover the Super Bowl loss. And I'm like, well, I cover losses. I did the Rams game. I know it was week 18. I covered all 3 losses when we had a 3-game stretch there. I've talked about why I didn't do one after the Ravens game. It was Christmas week. My kids were home. I had worked on a scouting video leading up to Christmas, and people don't remember, sometimes forget how much time scouting videos take. They take me 3 times as long as a breakdown video. So I was watching film probably 10 to 12 hours a day from Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday leading up to that, while trying to also work my other job, my main job. And so I was busy 16 to 17 hours a day. Actually, it was closer to 18, because I was only getting about 6 hours of sleep a night and only taking breaks to eat. And my kids were asking me, they were home. They were like, Daddy, we want you. We are always working. And that was really hard for me coming off that game to then turn around and try and do a breakdown on that when my kids were home after Christmas on a short week. I just wasn't going to do it. The few dollars I would have made from YouTube on that was not worth my kids. So I've gotten a little defensive over that with people, been like, you didn't cover the Ravens game. You didn't cover the Ravens game. I'm like, I chose my kids. So, and yes, I take my relationship with my kids very seriously. So, people can, I won't go much further on that. I start to get really irritable. And then when it comes to Super Bowl loss, again, I am not mentally strong enough to break that down and not let it make me really irritable for a few days. And like I said earlier, my kids didn't do anything wrong to me, and I don't want to sit there and be watching film for 6 hours and get really irritated and then snap at my kids. That's why I'm not going down that route. And there, like we said, like we're saying here, the next year's team is a new team. So yeah, a lot of the players are the same, but this is not the same team. I don't find as much value there. And really, I lost 150 subscribers right after the Super Bowl. So I don't think people are really, from people that are literally just like, I don't want to see 49er stuff on my YouTube timeline. Like, I don't want to see it at all. And so it's one of those of, the 50, 60 bucks I make on YouTube is not worth it to, snap at my kids. So that's what I mean. So this is the thing. You can say whatever you want about me. I don't really care. I'm not mentally strong enough to watch that Super Bowl breakdown and not let it affect me. So that's why we are not getting a Super Bowl breakdown. But we're moving on in a lot of different ways, and we're looking forward to free agency. So the 49ers right now. So Jason, I looked at your website. We are a little bit over $600,000 with cap space, right?
Yeah, we're about 601,918 under.
And so now,
yeah, that includes the top of 51 rule being into effect.
Yeah. So with that, now you have on your website, which is really great. If you guys don't know, if you ever are sorry, I bumped my microphone. If you are ever looking for 49ers stuff related to the salary cap and looking at different things, Jason, he writes articles there and he's got some really good stuff on there. And he's always got an updated to the minute cap figure there. You can go to 49erscap.com. I have it in the description of the video. He does a fabulous job with his website, and that's where I've been looking at a lot of his stuff to see exactly where they are. And so you have the 49ers with just over $600,000 in cap space for the top 51 rule. And then you also have your effective cap space, right?
Yes.
So that's a little bit different. Explain for us, you know, maybe if we aren't sure what that means between cap space and effective cap space.
Okay, regular cap space is with your top 51 rule. Now, my effective cap space for May, it differs.
And top 51 rule is the highest or most expensive 51 contracts with the team, correct?
Plus dead money, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the effective cap room for me, it may differ for other people who do this. For me, I do it as I take the entire commitment that they have for the year. So it's like $300 million that they have committed in salaries. And I take that and I minus it, or I take the adjusted cap minus it from the total committed for all 56 players. And that's why they'd be like 3 point something over the cap.
Okay, so that's the totality of all the contracts that they have, correct?
Yeah. That's with everyone counting against the cap. But only the top 51 count in the offseason, along with any kind of bonuses for the non-top 51 players.
Okay. So when does the 51 rule change and you have to count all 53 players?
The 51 rule, I believe it is towards the beginning of the season beginning. It goes from 51 to you have to be under the cap with your 53-man roster, your 16-man practice squad, as well as any injured players. Effectively, it's pretty much the Saturday before week 1 begins, but really it's Wednesday because the Chiefs will play Thursday night to open the season. So realistically, Wednesday, the day before the Chiefs open, the day before the Super Bowl team, the winning team opens the season, is when the top 51 rule goes away. Now, right now, the top 51 rule is not even in effect yet. It doesn't come into effect until 4 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday.
Okay. So as we look forward to free agency, when you see the options that the 49ers have, how can they kind of maneuver to create some space? I know, one, it was really good for the 49ers in that, and a lot of teams, when it was announced that the salary cap this season was going to be about $10 to $12 million more than what was projected. A lot of that had to do with the COVID earning losses dropping off. And then also, the NFL had just signed some massive media deals in the last couple of years. And one being, as much as people, as we as fans get frustrated with Thursday Night Football and how hard it is for your team to turn around and play on Thursday Night Football, that Amazon deal had a huge impact on the salary cap going up. I mean, that Amazon deal was massive, and you're really starting to see the fruits of that coming in now, as that deal has really brought in a massive amount of revenue for the NFL, and you're seeing the increased revenues from things like the NFL draft and all of that, where teams, there's a lot more money to be spread around the NFL now. Now, that also creates some difficulties in that it's just like inflation, where when you have more money to spend on goods and services, but your amounts of goods and services don't increase, they're not increasing the size of the rosters, so there's not more players that they're paying the same amount of players that they were before, but suddenly now there's a lot more money to spend on players. Contracts start increasing, because while the 49ers needed some cap relief, now you also have teams that we're going to have maybe $60 million in space, have $72 million in space.
Yeah.
So, that team can be more aggressive in free agency. So they're going to overpay for a right tackle. They're going to overpay for a center more than they would before, and it drives prices up. So as we're looking at this, what can the 49ers do to create some more space? I mean, yes, they have 56 players under contract, but I think we also look at the team and say, there's some places they can get better. There's some guys they need to retain.
Yeah.
And $600,000 is not a whole lot of space. Now,
it's not even the league minimum for the
right. And now when with under the 51 rule, you do have the ability, if you sign a guy, then that kind of bumps the last contract off there, which is $795,000. So yeah, you kind of have like 1.4 million in space, but that doesn't get you much. That doesn't get you much in the NFL.
No.
So I think one thing a lot of us have looked at is Brandon Ayuk is under his 5th-year option right now.
Yes.
So he's got it's a little over 14 million, 14.1, I believe, right?
Yeah, it's 14.124 million cap hit.
Okay, and that's just a base salary, fully guaranteed. Okay, that's his part of his rookie deal, and that was based upon his performance, so that he slotted into that for his 5th-year option. The 49ers can create some space if they get a new deal done with Brandon Ayuk, right?
Yes. Similar to the Nick Bosa contract last year when they created cap room, they can, in my latest article, I have Ayuk pegged at around $25 million a year.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because I was on the show with Adam, I think it was last Monday, we started talking about that, and I was looking at all of the wide receiver contracts, and I told Adam, I said, I think Brandon Ayuk is going to be $25 million a year, and he kind of went, oh, jeez, I said, look, that's what happens when the cap goes up, and you start looking at the contracts that are currently there. Brandon Ayuk is going to be a $25 million a year receiver. He just is.
Yeah. Yes, he's one of the top. Honestly, to me, he's one of the top 10 receivers in the league. He's proven it the past, I want to say, 3 seasons. I know his rookie year, I don't think he had the best year the next year, but the last 2 years, he led the team in receiving. He's earned what he's going to get. But with Brandon Ayuk, they can save in the area of $8 million if they were to do like a $25 million signing bonus, which I think that's what I have. I'm not 100% sure what I put down as a projection, but usually the 49ers like to do a 2-tier bonus. They like to do a signing bonus in year 1 that prorates over 5 years. So they'll always, if the contract, like I think Ayuk's contract's probably just going to be a 3-year extension, similar to Deebo's, just because the receivers are getting more money and taking less years. You look at the Mike Evans deal; it was a 2-year deal. And it actually comes in at $21 million a year because there's a lot of incentives in his contract. So,
I think I was talking with somebody on Twitter, and I made the same argument. They're like, "There's no way that that's expensive for Brandon Ayuk," and I said, "Well, I said to me, my ideal contract is a 4-year, $100 million contract, and around I think I said it was like 30 or 36 million in signing bonus, and then guarantee his 2021 salary or 2025 salary, and you end up with about 50 million in guaranteed money, which is a big portion of that contract. I mean, you're talking 50% of the contract is guaranteed money. That's what these guys want, but it also gives you an escape hatch against injury or something else. But then lowers the cap. I think when I ran the numbers on it, was something like $8 million in savings, like you said, for this season, because then you can put him on a minimum base salary this season, and all that's going to count is his minimum base salary and then the prorated signing bonus. And you start saving some good amount of money. I think that's the approach that they're really going to have to take. I would like to see a 4-year contract for Brandon Ayuk. I think that sets you up well to get him in a good position on his third contract to do more of the Mike Evans deal, where it's going to be more of a 2 or 3 year deal as you start seeing, receivers get into that point where maybe production starts dropping off. And I think that one of the sticking points that's going to be there, and this is where, I'm hoping the deal gets done sooner rather than later. But, we also said the same thing about Nick Bosa's contract last year, right? It was like, we could get a new deal done with Bosa. We'll get way under the cap. We'll have some room to do some stuff. And then, Nick Bosa's not signed until right before the season starts. But I think one of the sticking points is that, and where the two sides are going to have a hard time, is that Brandon Ayuk wants to be paid like a top 5 receiver in this league.
Yes.
The 49ers are going to look at it and say, well, but your numbers don't necessarily back that up. And then he's going to turn around and say, because I'm on a running team. Because the 49ers last season had 491 passing attempts. You know what rank that was in the league? That was 32nd in the league in passing attempts. Number 31 was the Tennessee Titans with 494 passing attempts. Baltimore Ravens were also there at 494. When you look at the Dallas Cowboys, they threw the ball 614 times. So that's a big spread. Or, excuse me, no. It was Washington Commanders were the number 1 in the league in attempts, and they were at 636 passing attempts. The Chiefs had 635. Wow. So you're talking 140 more targets for receivers and tight ends and everybody for some of these other teams than Brandon Ayuk is going to get, and the 49ers receivers are going to get. So I think there's going to be a sticking point there. Brandon Ayuk is going to say, I was as productive as I was on the team that threw the ball the least.
Yes.
You literally threw the ball least, and that's where 19 yards per catch comes in. And I think at one point, it was during the Detroit game, every single completion that went to Brandon Ayuk, or I think it was the Detroit game, was for a first down except for one. Like, it was like all but one pass to him was for a first down. So that's where there's, I think, going to be some rub, is that, and this is where the nitty gritty of the contracts come in, is that 49ers are going to say, they want to pay Brandon Ayuk, but they don't want to pay him a cent more than they have to.
Yeah.
I mean, look, teams will take care of guys, but they are also looking at, the 49ers salary is a lot more top heavy than you would even imagine. I think, it's something that we think they aren't as top heavy as they are, but when you start looking at their cap expenditures, it is extremely top heavy. There is so much money there at the top for their blue chip guys. Now, that's how really good teams tend to do it, but there is so much money at the top end there that they're going to sit there and say, we're going to try and mitigate that as much as possible, because they are so top heavy. I mean, you start looking at is something like $160 million of their spending is tied up in like 8 players. It's kind of bonkers when you look at it.
Yeah.
With that, 2/3 of your salary cap is tied up in 8 players, and you don't even have you're not even paying your franchise quarterback money. He is on a 7th round rookie deal. So I think they're going to try and mitigate that. But $25 million a year sounds about right. So you're thinking 3 years, not 4 years?
I'm thinking he's going to probably push for 3 years. The team might push for 4 years, but I think it'll be similar to Debo.
And why do you think he would want 3 years over 4 years? Because I think for most fans, we would say, well, when he want the security and the 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 contract there on paper of that he's going to make that money?
Yeah, I mean, on contract or on paper, you would think I want the longest deal I can get, but he wants to maximize the amount of money he can get. So he plays another 3 years with the team after 2024. He's a free agent again. He gonna get paid who knows what.
Yeah, he'll still be in the prime of his career.
Yeah, and the cap's gonna be going up even higher. It's gonna go up almost what I saw and what I've heard is 20 to 25 million a year. It's gonna go up.
Wow.
Each year. And it went up by 30.6 million this year, which was huge, but that was to basically pay back what happened with COVID and everything.
Yeah. So I mean, you're looking at least an 8 or 9% increase is what they're planning on and what they're expecting, which is crazy. Eventually, fans won't even be able to afford to go to games.
Yeah.
And then the market will reset. But I think when I looked at it, I was thinking what made dollars and cents for me was a 4-year contract with 2 void years added on to help spread out that the bonus payment in there. That if you can do that and you can get that, because I want to say I was looking at it was going to be a $36 million signing bonus, $14 million of base salary in 2025, fully guaranteed, and $100 million over 4 years, 2 void years added on. That was going to put his cap number this season like right around $7 million, I think was what I was looking at, or thinking about for him. That would make sense for the 49ers because then they save a good bit this season. His cap figure is still relatively lower next season, and then by that third season, like you're saying, it's going to go up 20, between 24 and 25 million a year when you're into that third season, and his cap figure balloons and suddenly is like $30 million. Well, guess what? Your cap now is $50 million more than it is now. You're at a $300 million cap space. And I think what you're seeing now, the big difference between now and how the cap was done 20 years ago is that you have 20 years of data on growth in the NFL to the cap. So I think it's a lot more predictable right now as far as we know minimum we're going to get this much more next season. And then you have a surprise like this season where you get more. Hey, great. That's fantastic. Yeah. But other than COVID happening, there's not this shock of, oh gosh, the cap isn't going up. So I think that's been really helpful, and teams have started to figure out, okay, now what we can do is basically load everything up so that while we have our key players in their prime, we can keep kind of kicking that down the road. We'll pay it all in 1 year, basically, when that happens on a reset year. Teams are planning for that now, I think. They're planning on reset years, and they're saying, okay, we're going to let the bill come due all at once so that's a reset year. We wipe it off there. We don't sit there and have, like the 49ers did in the late 90s, early 2000s, this lingering cap problems. Where it's like year after year after year after year. It's just there's so much in dead money that's hitting you, relative to the cap. I think that's where teams have changed their approach on it, and it's been really interesting to see, because you look at like how the Eagles structured Jalen Hurts' contract. I think it's 2029 or 2030. They have a balloon payment due on him that he's not even like under contract for that season, and there's $97 million counting against the cap for him in one season, right? Like, because it's all these void years that are added on. And the prorated bonus there at the end, like, it's crazy, but it keeps him for 6 years at a low cap figure. And what they're going to do is at the end of that, they're going to extend him, and they're going to push that down the road, and they're going to get, in by 2050, hopefully for them, is what they're thinking, or, whatever, 2040, they're going to sit there and say, we'll let this payment come due, and then we'll clear it all at the cap this season and then move forward. what happened was the Saints were planning on doing that, and then they got totally screwed because that also coincided with COVID, and then they couldn't even field the team, and so they had to kind of put themselves in that situation. So I think it's been interesting. So another couple guys that I think are, and you have talked about, that are prime for a restructure to create some cap space. Which, when we talk about restructure, we're looking at converting their base salary into a signing bonus or a roster bonus, however they want to do it, and then prorating that money over the life of the contract. I think a couple of guys that really make sense, and you've talked about, is Fred Warner and Deebo Samuel. So Deebo, I think, is one that can save a lot of money, right?
He's the one that can save the most money. He can save over $15.8 million. And the reason why I picked Deebo as the guy that I'm saying you restructure is because if you look at his contract, his cap number decreases next year because his base salary actually goes down. It doesn't go up.
Because they front-loaded his contract, right?
They basically front-loaded it with... I wouldn't say they front-loaded it completely. I would say they front-loaded it cash-wise. They back-loaded it cap-wise because they have void years tacked onto it. But he has this big $20.9 million base salary, and then it goes down next year. To me, it was like, okay, the 49ers were always going to restructure Deebo this year. That was what's going to happen. That's what makes the most sense.
Yeah, this was a year where they had a potential for an out as well, because now they're looking at, he's got this big base salary. We do have some cap savings if Deebo, he signs his contract and then he just shows up not really ready to do his thing. They usually do it with players where they're going to play under a contract for a couple years and then they have an out. Yeah. The 49ers always build an out in after a couple of years, and this was that out year with Brandon Ayuk, where you save a lot of money. But it's like you said, there's a lot of cash payment up front in that they gave him big signing bonus, they gave a lot of guaranteed money, and then on this season he's got a big base salary, so there's a lot of money to be paid out over the first 3 years of that contract. A lot of money to be paid out.
Yeah.
But if they're saying, okay, you know what, Deebo, we love how you came in last year. You were ready to go. You worked your tail off all off season because you wanted to win a Super Bowl, not because you were going to be guaranteed a bunch of money if you did. So that's what they like to see. That then makes sense to turn around and say, let's convert a big chunk of this to signing bonus and spread it out over the next few seasons, because even if they don't use that space, I loved what they did with the restructures last year.
Yeah, I did too.
And I think people don't understand how smart that really was, because it lowered the spread out amount for this season. It made more sense to restructure last season, carry it over into this season than it did to restructure this season, because it spread out. It made that prorated bonus for this season, because you're spreading it over 3 and 4 years instead of 2 and 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
That prorated bonus that was counting this year for those guys who did it, Eric Armstead and George Kittle, and I believe Fred Warner did last year, that this year their prorated bonus that was spread out is a lower figure. So it actually made more sense money wise. They gained more in that value by doing those restructures last year and rolling it over into this year than they did. So I think with a guy like Deebo Samuel, it's going to do the same thing. Even if you don't use that money for this year's free agency, for this year's contract, being able to do it this year, spread it on this year, next year, and the next year, and the next year, actually makes more sense. It saves you more next season if you roll it over. So it's kind of like taking a combined from 2023 and 2024 and adding it in, instead of just getting that a little bit extra from 2024.
Exactly.
And so, I think the Deebo restructure is a no-brainer here.
Yeah.
I think they're going to do it pretty quickly. They're going to do it, I think, probably this weekend. I would assume that it happens this weekend, or they have him like, hey, stick around the facility to be able to come in and do this if we need
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a guy that's really interested. Fred Warner's another guy, so not to tangent too much here, but with Debo, how much money are they looking at being able to free up with Debo?
Debo, it's to the exact number. I actually know it by heart, which is crazy. They can save $15,877,600.
Boy, not to put too fine a point on it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a pretty good chunk of change.
Yeah.
And when you look at the way that a lot of these different contracts can be structured, that gives you a lot of flexibility. That gives you enough. You can do a pretty good size signing with somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you do it where it's like Debo's contract, where it's going to be low base salary in the front end, signing bonus. You can fit a pretty good sized contract under that kind of a structure.
Yeah.
So, you're looking at then possibly $7-8 million there with Brandon Ayuk if they get that deal done. I don't expect that to be done before free agency.
No.
But Debo, you're looking at a little over $15 million, almost 16 million, right?
Right. Almost 16.
So what are you looking at with Fred Warner?
I believe Fred Warner is around 11 million if they restructure his contract.
So they're looking at potentially $27 million in freed up space, which is a big difference from 600,000. I mean, that's a big jump when you go from 600,000 to 27 million. I think one of the ones that people have thrown around, and I'm not so sure about. I just don't know. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, of Arik Armstead.
I wouldn't restructure his contract if they feel like he can play beyond 2024. I would extend it because he's got a dead cap hit pending next year at 15.54 million. That's why you don't restructure his contract again, because you're just going to add on even more dead money next year. And if you don't resign him before the deal voids, which usually is 5 days after the Super Bowl ends, then you're shit out of luck. You're stuck with a huge. That also goes for Charvarius Ward. He has about $12 million dead money because they restructured his contract last year.
Yeah, and Armstead's a guy, I love him. I think he's a fantastic player. He's been a core player. I would love to see him retire as a 49er.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's still a ways away from retirement of what he wants to do, but there's been some chronic lower leg issues, foot issues, knee issues. And can you pay a guy what they're paying him? And I mean, he's a pretty big cap number this year. He's a $28 million cap number this year.
Yeah.
That's a big cap number. Can you pay a guy that kind of money? I'm not saying they should cut him. I'm not saying they should do anything there, but if you're looking at a restructure, well, now your next year's cap, like you say, your next year's cap number on him starts to get really, really high. And for a guy that you're a little uncertain about what is his future going to hold, I mean, next year, his cap figure, like you said, is $15.5 million. You restructure now, you're going to add on another $8 million to that. You're looking at 23 some million dollars in dead money against a guy that you now have to re-sign to not count $25 million in debt on you.
Yeah.
So, that's one I've seen that floated around. They could restructure Arik Armstead. They could. Would I do it? Absolutely not. I think you're going to you're robbing Peter to pay Paul at that point. You only have 2 years with Arik Armstead of effective cap numbers. Right. And you're either going to have to pay that piper now or next year. And next year's already looking pretty rough. So, he's that guy, like we talked about, that you tend to keep pushing that down the road until there's that retirement point, and and you really just eat it all in that year of a reset year. Armstead, to me, they just have to deal with him being a $28 million cap hit this season, and that goes along there. Another guy that is possible. I'm not sure how much bang for your buck you're going to get there, but I do think he's going to get a new contract next year. Is George Kittle? You can save some space there with George Kittle. Would you restructure George Kittle?
If I would do it only if my philosophy with restructuring contracts is you restructure a contract that of a player that is in your long-term plans. So if they feel George Kittle can still be productive after his contract is up in 2026, then yeah, you restructure it. It's fine. But if they don't think so, they're not gonna. Because he would also have pending dead money.
Right. Now, I think George Kittle makes sense just because, he's the epitome of this team and their mentality. I mean, George and Claire Kittle are national treasures, and we should protect them for everything. What I don't ever want to see is George Kittle playing for another team. I don't want to see George Kittle going Ronnie Lott, right? Like, and Roger Craig. Like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see George Kittle, because you know what would happen, right? You know what happened is that Travis Kelce would retire, George Kittle is a free agent, and then the Chiefs would freaking sign George Kittle. Like,
yeah,
no, that cannot happen. You cannot let that happen for anything. I would riot. There would be a problem here.
Definitely.
So to me, I think George Kittle is another candidate there. Again, you can then create another $6 million in cap space this season for George Kittle.
Oh boy, I have it on my website. What it exactly is.
I'm gonna look it up right here.
I have it listed on my
9.752 million. Okay, that's what it is. 9.752 million is what you have on your website for George Kittle. I think that makes sense. Another guy that's interesting, and I think really gives you a lot of flexibility but it's tricky. People get weird about this position. We'll see. Christian McCaffrey. Would you restructure Christian McCaffrey?
They did it once, and I think that is a tough one. Just because the pounding that he's taking, he had over 2,000 all-purpose scrimmage yards last season, and that's a lot. He took a pounding, and I know he's the guy that wants to play every down.
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't get him off the field last year.
No, I mean, there were games where you didn't see Elijah Mitchell or Jordan Mason in the game at all. I mean, he played like every down that they had a running back in.
Yeah. Now here's and that's why I bring that one up, because that's usually what people say is you don't keep locking yourself in with a running back because of the mileage, right? Because there's this idea, once a guy hits 1,500 carries, that production really starts dropping off, and then when they hit 2,000 carries, it really starts dropping off.
Yeah.
Christian McCaffrey. What's interesting about Christian McCaffrey, though, and here's why I think that maybe is a little bit different, is that Christian McCaffrey, when you look at historically what running backs had as far as attempts per season, Christian McCaffrey is just not, you're not seeing the same sort of mileage on a Christian McCaffrey as you would see in players in previous years, in different generations, because even with the 49ers running the ball as much as they have, they're not running. You're not seeing this just massive amount of attempts. For example, if we look at like Frank Gore, 2006, that was Frank Gore's career year, right? Like that was the year that we really, put him on the map as far as this is one of the best running backs in the league. Frank Gore had 312 rushing attempts. That was a good amount of attempts. Now you also look at like Le'Veon Bell when he was with the Steelers, and before the year he was franchise tagged, and he sat out that whole year. Okay, he had like 400 rushing attempts. That was pretty common. You see LaDainian Tomlinson get 350, 400 attempts a year on a 16 game season. Christian McCaffrey last season had 272 attempts.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how many carries he had.
Yeah.
And that was the most carries or second most carries he's had in his career. In 2019, he had 287 carries. So he's never had more than 300 carries on a season.
And yet he led the league in rushing, which is crazy.
Right. Now again, league rushing stats have tended to drop down. He had, just under 1,500 yards rushing, where I think I looked at it like 2006 or 2007. It was back. I was looking up different stats, and, the top three guys in rushing all had over 1,800 yards or like 1,750 yards. Like they would all be miles ahead of what was, this year. That the league really just, you don't see running backs getting yards like they used to.
You don't.
I mean, I think it was like Priest Holmes had something like 1,795 yards, and so, it's like they're just not being as used much. So for me, I'm looking at it and saying, okay, the older metrics we had about when a running back hits 27, 28 years old and they're getting this mileage on them, you don't want to pay them another big contract. I think that's maybe changing a little bit. I think, these guys aren't really getting the kind of mileage. We think of Christian McCaffrey as having, he was, because he didn't come off the field and there's all this wear and tear.
Yeah.
Well, I think the 49ers are looking at saying he takes really good care of his body.
Oh,
He's not getting the kind of mileage that you even saw from running backs, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So maybe these guys are going to have another year or two that we have their prime. So, and the only reason I think he makes sense as a contract restructure is because he has so little bonus prorated money. One of the huge benefits of trading for him and why we paid what we did for him was because the Panthers were eating a huge amount of dead money on him for the signing bonus he had. So when he came over, he had 0 prorated bonus. It was only the base salary that he had on his contract when he's come over. And so when they restructured him last year, they were able to free up space. He's only got $2.14 million in prorated bonus for this season and next season. So his prorated bonus money is really low. You have the ability to restructure this year, and then next year it's still not that high of a prorated bonus. Really his 2025 contract, then, like, his cap figure would be more on par with what his average per year contract should have been and what it would have been with the Panthers when he signed their contract, because you have him listed here as a possible restructure to create $8.472 million in space.
Yeah. When I look at Christian McCaffrey, I would restructure it if they're planning on doing what they did last year, restructure, carry over the money into 2025. Because right now I have them projected at, I think, $46 million under a $280 million cap. But they don't have a lot of players signed again. Most of the money is on the top end.
Yeah, they're going to have to figure out what to do with a number of players. Dre Greenlaw is going to be one of those guys. What do you do with Dre Greenlaw there? What happens with Colt McKivitz? He's going to be a guy that's, what have you figured out there at right tackle? Now, personally, I would like to see them pick up one of these tackles out of this draft. I think it's almost been unfortunate with some of these guys that their draft stock has been rising. At the start of really the offseason after the Super Bowl, a guy like Fortuna was projecting to be a early second round pick. And right now people are looking at, he's not going to make it past 16. Some of these tackles are climbing up the boards. A guy like Tyler Guyton, a guy I really liked there at the Senior Bowl. I think I would be surprised. I think the 49ers would have to trade up to try and get him at this point. Whereas a month and a half ago, he was probably going to be, maybe go 36 into the 42 range. Now he's looking at that 22 to 28 range. Some people are projecting him as high as 22. And I think those are two tackles that are even within the 49ers reaching range. Now there's questions. Should they let a tackle go and then get one of these explosive edge guys that are there? I don't know. That I personally, I saw enough of McKivitz last year to say I don't want McGlinchey 2.0 around again. And they're going to be letting him go. If they didn't pay McGlinchey, they're not paying Colton McKivitz.
No, they won't.
And I think they got the same very similar production, but a little less run blocking from McKivitz than they did McGlinchey. So they're not going to pay him. They're going to let him walk. So they have to get that right tackle in the works. Trent Williams is not going to be here forever. They have got to address the tackle position and really through the draft. So if they're going to do it, this year would be the year to do it. Now, there's been some interesting news here with that, the Broncos are eating ridiculous amounts of cap space this year.
Yeah, they are.
Personally, I don't see how they do Russell Wilson's as not a post June 1st cut.
It has to be.
I mean, it has to be. It has to be. There is no way they eat like $90 million in cap almost on Russell Wilson to not play for them.
Over the 2 years, it's $85 million in dead money.
That's just wild. Like they find him more valuable. They find him $40 million more valuable to be off their team than the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Like, that's wild to me.
That may go down as the worst trade in history.
It has to.
And I get
this has to be worse than the OJ Simpson trade. It has to be.
And I get 49er fans are upset about the Trey Lance trade. But when you look at what Russell Wilson, they gave up 2 firsts, 2 seconds.
That's the thing.
Players.
It's not just the cap space. They gave away all of those picks, and
they gave him a new contract.
Getting hosed on that dead money. My goodness.
Yeah. That's got to be the worst trade that I've ever seen.
So with this, and them having to carry so much dead money on Russell Wilson, they're looking at shedding a few contracts as well.
Yeah.
And one of the names that's out there, and it was reported that the 49ers have reached out, and I think makes a ton of sense. And we talked about this last Monday when I was looking at some draft guys. I kept comparing a few guys to this guy because I said we haven't replaced him, and that's DJ Jones. DJ Jones is due something like $9.9 million. I bumped my mic again. Is due something $9.9 million in space this year. So it's the 49ers reached out and potentially are looking at being a trade partner and picking up the rest of his contract. What do you think about that?
I'd love it. I'd love it if they were to trade for him, and I would not be opposed to giving him a couple-year extension as well to lower that potential like almost $10 million cap hit. It's almost 10 million. It's not at 10 million.
It's 9.49 million is his cap figure this year. So I mean they could even just sign him with a void year, correct? Could they do that? Or just say, hey, we're gonna give you convert that to bonus, and then tack a void year on next year, and basically split that in half, and say, okay, so now this year you're a $4.75 million cap hit or base salary or salary hit this year on top of that, because then Denver would eat the prorated signing bonus of just under $3 million. So you could get DJ Jones for a $4.75 million hit this year, and then you have $4.75 in dead money next year. But then you have the ability to try and do maybe a 2-year extension on him or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, see how that is. And again, what I like about that is DJ Jones is a guy that I think you can plug in there if Armstead is not, if next year it looks like Armstead, these lingering health problems are there.
Yeah.
And as much as I hate to say it, you start thinking we maybe need to move on from Eric at this point in his career. We're not signing him to a new contract. Either that or he's going to got to come back on a really cheap deal.
Yeah.
So that we can extend out this prorated dead money that you're going to hit. I think DJ Jones is a guy that you can plug in there and you're not going to have this huge drop off. You're going to still have good production because,
right.
You know, look, and depending on what they do with Edge, you got Nick Bosa, you got Javon Hargrave, and you got one other guy. You don't need an all-pro there at your other position. You need a guy that's going to be able to be a run stuffer and play that plugger role that they love, that DJ Jones was so good at. And DJ Jones was also very productive with the 49ers. I think he hasn't been a really great fit there in Denver, but he hasn't played bad. No. You know, and so this is that's something that to me, I would absolutely love to see DJ Jones come back. Bring DJ home. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Like, I've been looking at like McKinley Jackson as a prospect in the draft that I think, okay, you know, he really reminds me of DJ Jones. When I saw him walk out on the field in the Senior Bowl, I was like, that looks just like DJ Jones. I mean, his build is almost identical to him. And the way he moves, his quickness and his bend reminded me a lot of DJ Jones. I would like to see us get him and get McKinley Jackson, but that's just me.
Yeah, we need interior defensive line help,
which is wild when you look at, okay, they went and signed Javon Hargrave last year. Now, again, I think some of those issues with Hargrave was you know, what he was asked to do this year and the way they set them up was just not the same as what Philly did. Philly set up so many one-on-one rush opportunities that those guys just feasted. And this year it was so vanilla with our pass rush schemes. It was very, very frustrating with that. Is there a guy out there in free agency that you know, we're looking at the 49ers could potentially create $42+ million in cap space? That's a pretty good chunk of change. Right. Do you see them making a big splash? Or is there a guy that you would say, you know, I would love for them to really go after this guy?
I think they will make a splash move. I don't know who it will be. The guy that I like is Danielle Hunter from
I was wondering if you were going to say that. I was thinking about that. I'm like, you know, when I look through this list of free agents, I start thinking, man, Danielle Hunter would sure be nice on that defensive line.
Yeah, that's the guy that I would target day one on Monday to try to get. If they go right guard, honestly, I don't think they're gonna overpay a right guard when you can pretty much get John Feliciano for like $5 million a year. I think.
Oh, you think he goes as high as 5? I was wondering if he was going to be like 4. You know, somewhere around the Jake Brendel sort of contract.
Yeah, the $4 to $5 million range.
Yeah, and I think so too. I think, you know, what I've looked at is when you start looking at this offensive line free agent class, I am not loving this offensive line free agent class. There's a reason a lot of these guys are available. You know, teams have been locking up any of the guys that would be good free agent prospects on the offensive line because they're in short supply. And so because of that, you're seeing a lot of guys who
are going to get overpaid.
You're going to see guys getting overpaid. Yeah, exactly. You're going to see, you're going to get something that is not that much of an upgrade for a lot more money.
Right.
And that doesn't make sense to me. And like I've talked about, I think this draft is really strong in the lines. I think where this draft is strongest is offensive line, defensive line, wide receiver. I think those 3 positions are very strong in this draft. That you have a lot of good options there, which bodes well for the 49ers, I think, when they're going forward. So to me, they need to load up on those trenches, man. The only concern I have with Danielle Hunter is, again, we had the defensive line that we had this year. We went into the Super Bowl and the Chiefs held all all Super Bowl, and the refs weren't going to call it.
Yeah.
So does it make sense to invest so heavily on your defensive line?
Yeah.
If when you get to the biggest game of the year, the refs are going to let the offensive line hold and negate that, which is something that's extremely frustrating. But the idea of Danielle Hunter with Nick Bosa is pretty scary.
Yeah.
Now, there was a question somebody had that asked about Danielle Hunter's injury history. Technician asks, is Danielle Hunter's injury a question or issue? So last year, he did play almost 89% of the snaps for Minnesota.
Yeah, he had, I think, 16 and a half sacks or 15 and a half sacks.
He
was a monster last year.
Yeah, he was fully healthy last year, was able to get in there, and he played. I mean, that's a lot of snaps. That's around the amount of snaps that Nick Bosa is going to take. I think Nick Bosa actually takes like 86% of the snaps. So that's really good as far as field presence for a guy when they're going to be, hardly anybody's going to be playing 99% of the snaps unless you're Mason Crosby.
Right.
And so I don't see that as a big problem. It is crazy looking at this free agency and how many players the Vikings have as free agents right now. It's wild.
Kirk
it's
Cousins.
Literally just I got to share this. I know that we're not talking about the Vikings, but I can't get it to pull up right now. But when I'm looking at this, it's it's like 14 players, 15 players. Something. It's literally, my screen is just purple with Vikings on there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of players there, but I think I would love to see us go after Danielle Hunter. I think that would be a huge addition there. And I think he's one of the only guys that really makes sense when you start looking at guys available in free agency.
Yeah.
I mean, they do have a need there at slot corner.
Yeah.
And, they may go after somebody. I'm not sure they will really pay for somebody there. I mean, when you look at like who's available and what sort of prospects you have, they're not great. I mean, when you're looking at slot, I mean, maybe a guy like Kendall Fuller makes sense, but I think he's going to want to play outside. I think he's going to want some good money. I think he's a guy I don't know. That's just what I'm looking at. One guy that's interesting to me, and I want to see your thoughts on this.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder at the stage he's at in his career, Stephon Gilmore. Would you bring him in to play nickel? Now, it's a different position than he's played.
Yeah.
But I think where he's at in his career, he's not that top flight outside guy who's going to have that speed to run down the field with somebody. Are you gonna want to match him up against Tyreek Hill on the outside? Are you going to want to match him up against DK Metcalf on the outside? I don't see that.
No. But
if you're asking him to play more of this hybrid, almost like a linebacker role, he's been a guy who's usually been pretty good in against the run. Would you go after Stephon Gilmore?
I would consider Gilmore. It'd have to be the right price. I wouldn't pay a lot because he's up there in age. He's got the mileage on him, and I know a lot of people. Corner's a need. It's a real need, and I've seen people on forums. I'm not going to say the name. We know which one we're talking about. And someone was saying how we should restructure this guy and that guy, and then sign Robert Hunt, Neil Hunter, and trade for L'Jarius Sneed. And I'm like,
you would trade for L'Jarius Sneed, huh?
That's what
you've seen that, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, that'll kill our cap next year. You can't.
Yeah. No. This is what's fascinating. You get into this part of the season and people just, it's wild. It's like, get every last guy that might be available. And you start going, well, no, there are some realities. People like, the cap doesn't really exist. And you go, no, it really does. You can't do everything.
You can manipulate the cap, but you can't have 53 players on your roster that are all pro
Right.
bowlers. You know,
Right.
it's like people expect the roster to be all pros, and it's like you can't. This isn't baseball.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and you can't have like a 10-year deferred contract with
Yeah,
this stuff. A big super thank you for the big time super chat from Zach Shrout, huge friend of the channel. We love Zach. He is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. This actually leads into another one. Would you re-sign Chase Young? Would you look at getting him? What do you think he's going to make this year?
that is a tough question. Originally, when we got him, I thought he would be somewhere in that 20 million to 25 million a year because I was expecting the production. He was playing well in Washington. He had, I think, 5 sacks in Washington.
Yeah, he was having a career year in Washington.
And then he comes over to us and he's basically non existent. He played good in the first game against the Jaguars, but the rest of the season, the only game that he played really good in was the Super Bowl. That was the one game I noticed where he was making plays. Other than that, he was kind of going off script, doing his own thing. And that was the worry that a lot of people had when we acquired him, that he was a guy that it wasn't disciplined, didn't do what the team asked him to do. If they bring him back, it's a 1-year prove it deal. I think it's more in the line of 10 to 15 million. That's it. That's it. That's I don't think I would even go that high.
So I think some comps for him would be maybe what Marcus Davenport got with the Vikings last year.
Yeah, he got I think a 1-year $15 million
13,
contract.
yeah. It was at 13 million. Preston Smith just re-signed with the Packers at 12 and a half. I think that's what makes sense. You know, when you start looking at it, can you say that he's going to be down there with Carl Lawson? Maybe. I mean, he's a guy that's going to be available. You know, some of these different guys that would be available. To me, if we were going to re-sign a specialist edge guy and it came down to Chase Young or Leonard Floyd, I would probably go after Leonard Floyd. I think you're going to get him for cheaper, and you get about the same production you got out of Chase Young. Chase Young, you know, is getting that first real big contract that he's going to get as far as that second contract. So I think he's going to want, now a team may want to do like a 2-year, $26 million contract for him. I think that makes sense for him. Now I was one, again, I thought as well when they signed him that probably they're just going to keep him this year, get really good production out of him, let him walk next year. He's going to make 18, 19, 20 plus million. 49ers are going to get a third round comp back for him. I don't know if he makes that kind of money this year. So to me, unless he's coming back for 10 million, I'm not bringing Chase Young back.
No,
I think now what I do like was once he came back, you saw Nick Bosa's production start to increase again.
Yeah.
Because what I saw in film was that teams were no longer just putting all edge help to Nick Bosa's side. You started to actually see some running backs and tight ends chip on the other side.
Yeah.
That had not happened the entire season until we got Chase Young, and teams were afraid of his speed rush. So while he wasn't super productive, he did help Nick Bosa out. So it really highlighted to me how much that opposite edge is a need, and that they need to address it somehow. Personally, I would like to see him to go get Danielle Hunter. I think if he's not there, go get Leonard Floyd. Those are my top two, you know, or the kid from the Jets, Carl Lawson, or not, Bryce Huff. Sorry, Bryce Huff. Bryce Huff. I think those three make sense to me.
Yeah.
In descending or you know, probably for me, it's Danielle Hunter, Bryce Huff, and then Leonard Floyd, and then Chase Young after that. That's where I see it. I think, you know, there's these things of go get Brian Burns. I just don't see how you make him and Nick Bosa's contracts work together as far as that much invested in your defensive line. Yes, that's your generation's Freeney and Mathis, but that is a massive amount to be invested into edge. And I know people are like, but the Rams can go get him. Yeah, they can. And then that sucks. The idea of him and Byron Young and
Yeah.
Aaron Donald together, but you would have to figure it out.
Yeah, and they're not paying multiple guys on the D line like we are, the amount we are. You've got Hargrave at 21 million a year, Nick Bosa at 34, Armstead at 17. I mean, you've got Byron Young's on a rookie contract. Aaron Donald's making the most of the D line.
Yeah.
That's
and that's where I also, look at, as much as people are getting tired of seeing us get draft defensive linemen in the first round and stuff, you need to, I think they need to get cheap on that defensive line.
Yeah.
If you can't get Danielle Hunter, or you can't get Bryce Huff at a cheap deal, or Leonard Floyd at a cheap deal, then you go the draft. And I think there's going to be some options there. That's why I'm also not sold on the 49ers absolutely needing to say, okay, we're gonna trade up to get a tackle in this draft at this point. Again, it's a position need. They've got to figure out that going forward, but they also really need that edge. They need an edge, and they need a cheap one on a rookie deal. I think Broswell out of Alabama is going to be available. It's going to be around there at the end of the first draft. He's an edge kid, had 13 sacks for the Tide last year. Looked pretty good at the Senior Bowl. And so there's been a lot going on in the chat around Tyler Guyton back and forth. Here's the reason I like Tyler Guyton. And there's been some questions. He didn't bench press at the combine. Okay. But when you look at Chris Broswell, he is an absolute athletic freak. He squats something like 695 pounds. He's one of the benches somewhere in the near 500, is over 450 pounds. He was one of the better performers at the combine for the bench press among defensive ends. I think he was third or fourth on there for defensive line. Broswell is a very stout guy. When you see him on tape again with Alabama, he was like a brick wall. That tackles could not move him even at 250 pounds. In the one-on-ones and team drills, Broswell was going against Tyler Guyton a lot, and Guyton had no problem standing up to the power rush from Broswell. That's why I like Tyler Guyton there, and I think that the bench press isn't as much of a problem. I think he will be able to stand up against some of those rushes. From what I've seen, his biggest problem hasn't been necessarily raw power. It's been he gets too high because he's 6'8", and so that's where he can struggle against that power rush. If he gets too high, he just is. You get underneath somebody's pads, it doesn't matter how strong they are. So his bigger issues to me is bend at the knees for pad level, being 6'8". That is a massive human being at 6'8". He's a really tall guy. So want to get to another super chat here. Jason Captain Niner Massey, he says, how's it at Power Brand Systems? It is fantastic. I'm so thankful that you brought that up, because even when I put it in my notes, I forget to talk about it. We have a members website, jfa49.com, and you can go there, become a member. That is run by a company called Power Brand Systems. They are phenomenal. Christian Gomez and Marcos, his brother, have been absolutely phenomenal with me. They approached me, built the website, did everything. I had to do very little, as far as I just kind of gave them a small direction, and they have such a good mind for branding, for layout, for understanding how to marketing and all that stuff. They have put together a great website. Now, I do have some more exclusive content coming. I have got one exclusive video up there right now. I'm working on a lot for this off season. I was actually trying to put one out yesterday, and got into the editing of it. Really didn't like a few things I had on there, and I'm having to reshoot it. So there is more exclusive content coming. Hopefully I can get it up this afternoon. I don't know. I got to leave on a business trip in about 4 hours, so we'll see. But there is more coming. You can go and become a member at jfa49.com, where the biggest thing is it supports this channel. It keeps us going. It keeps us going through the off season, keeps us going through the season, covers a lot of our overhead. There's a lot that goes into producing a show like this. I know it looks like, well, you guys just put a camera in front of your face and talk on a microphone. There's a lot of other things that go into it as well, and hosting services and all that, and especially during the season. So, our members are absolutely phenomenal. Love every one of them. They've been amazing for us. But if you are a content creator, a small business owner, you are looking to improve your reach and expand how far you can get out there, Power Brand Systems is a place for you. They do such an amazing job, and they have such a good mind for all of this, that they help so much that they can build you a website, they can build you a members portal, they can do whatever you need to help you grow your reach. That's the biggest thing, growing your reach. It's such a crowded field out there. They help you do that. And for people who are referred through me right now, they're waiving a ton of their startup fees for it. So if you are interested in that, you can check out Power Brand Systems / Johnny Dell. Power Brand Systems / PB Systems / Johnny Dell is where you can go. pbsystems.com / Johnny Dell. Let me get it right. It should be there in the link in the description. Reach out to them. They are absolutely fantastic. Or you can just message me. I'll give you their info. They've been absolutely fantastic. They not only do my member site, they do John Chapman's. So if you're familiar with John Chapman's stuff and what he does, they've done his. That's actually how I got on board with them, and they've been absolutely phenomenal every step of the way. Love those guys. They are really amazing. They just roll out some new features today, which is amazing. They're always doing this. They're always working with us and everything. So thank you so much for the super chat and all that. Oh, and there's another big giant super chat there from Zach Shrout. He said it's very difficult to evaluate D-line from last season considering how bad the scheme was. Yeah. You saw Fred Warner go off script repeatedly. Lack of trust in tying coverage and rush killed it. It is, and that's what's hard for me with Chase Young. Is I'm sitting there going, yeah, Chase Young did not perform like he did, like I was expecting. Neither did Nick Bosa. Neither did Javon Hargrave. I mean, right now, the Javon Hargrave signing from some different people is being graded as like a B-, or like a C. Not well. It's not being graded well because, there wasn't that what he produced in Philadelphia. So when you start looking at, okay, maybe, some of these issues were not just Chase Young, but the entirety of the defensive line. What's your top dollar to bring back Chase Young?
My top dollar?
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you, 10 million.
Okay. Still going to stick at that?
Yeah, I'm not going. I would do 10 million and then add some incentives into the contract. That way he's more motivated to kind of like play with the team instead of doing his own thing.
So would you do something like 9.5 million base, or let's go $6 million base, $3 million signing bonus? This is again per year.
Yeah, per game.
And then slap on an incentive that, like a likely to be earned incentive that says, if you get 10 sacks, there's a $4 million escalator in here.
Right.
If you get 15 sacks, there's an extra $2 million escalator in there. Would you do something like that?
Yeah, I would consider that. I'm not sure if I would go as high as like 6 million total in incentives. I think.
Well, I mean, if a guy's getting 15 sacks.
Yeah.
I mean, they basically were paying Nick Bosa, almost $2 million a sack?
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that as reasonable. Yeah.
Now, here's the question. Do you think that Chase Young, do you think his demand on the market is gonna get more?
I think he may end up being like Jadeveon Clowney, where he's gonna have to sign a 1-year deal.
That's another guy that I am a little interested in. Would you go after Jadeveon Clowney?
I'm not so sure. He doesn't really show up as much as I'd like him
He
to.
disappears for stretches. That's the
Yeah.
biggest problem with Jadeveon Clowney is he will be productive, and the reason he's never,
Yeah.
he's not been getting that big deal, and he's kind of, floated around, is that he'll just go like 4 games where he disappears. But then he'll show up for 3 games and look like he's the best defensive end, edge guy in the league.
Yeah.
Where he's a monster, and what in the world? And he just is whooping some of the best left tackles and tackles in the game, period. But then he'll just disappear for a while. It's like, what in the world?
Yeah.
There's a question here. I think Greg has asked this earlier, and my thoughts about this, about moving Armstead to defensive end. I would say I don't hate that for base downs. I don't hate that idea if, say, what we did when Robert Saleh was here, a lot of times you would have on base downs, Eric Armstead's playing defensive end because he's so good against the run and so good out there against the run. You have Nick Bosa on one side, Eric Armstead on the other, and then they would have DJ Jones, and then it was, a time DeForest Buckner, and then Javon Kinlaw in there with DJ Jones. And I would like to see them go to a route like that. And that's also where I guess where I'm looking at, okay, if they're looking at somebody in free agency, a guy like Bryce Huff makes a lot of sense, or a rotational edge rusher. I don't think they envision that for Drake Jackson. They wanted him to be that kind of a guy, and he's just not turned into that. And, just had major knee surgery nobody knew about. And suddenly he posted on his Instagram and everyone was like, wait, Drake Jackson had surgery? They invested a 2nd-round pick into him. He has just not developed into the player that he really should be. I don't think you can count on him. I would like to see them get DJ Jones, allow them to do that, and then they really just need a situational edge rusher, where that's where you really start shining. And to me, you do that, this defense can really start returning to what it should be, and that is earning the right to rush the passer and being able to really do some creative things on that side. And you earn the right to rush the passer by stopping the run. You have to stop the run first, and that then allows you to get into a lot of those creative pass rushes. Now, what we were having this last year with Wilkes was that they weren't always earning the right to rush the passer, and then when they were, the creativity on the front was not there. That they had some creativity on the back end, but just they weren't doing things to really create one-on-ones in the pass rush situation that were advantageous. It was endlessly frustrating to watch teams sit there and just go 6- and 7-man protections to double both of our defensive ends, slide a center to Javon Hargrave, and then the only guy getting one-on-ones was either Javon Kinlaw or Eric Armstead, who was also dealing with foot issues and stuff. So, and wasn't fully healthy most of the year. And you're just having your coverage unit has to cover for 4 and 5 seconds, and that's just not realistic. And so I want to see some more creative stuff. I think that's a really good possibility moving forward. So, Jason, thank you so much. You've been absolutely fantastic. Where can people find you?
It's called X now, at 49ers Cap and 49erscap.com. I still call it Twitter. I'm still going to call it Twitter. So
I think it's going to always be, the app formerly known as Twitter. To me, it feels like, when Prince changed his name to a symbol because he was trying to get around his contract. I believe it was with Warner Brothers at the time. I want to say it was Warner Brothers. Let me know in the chat if I was right on that. Because Prince had this thing where he had this backlog of recorded music with them that they were waiting to release. They were going to release all these different albums of his. He wanted to record new music, but he couldn't under the name Prince because of his record contract. So he changed his name to a symbol. And he was the artist formerly known as Prince for so long until his record contract with them ended, and then he just went back to being called Prince. For me, it's like the app formerly known as Twitter. That you can change it to whatever. Everyone's just going to call you what it was and not what it is. It just X doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to me. Elon Musk and his obsession with the letter X is just weird.
Yeah.
But
That is super weird.
yeah, I mean, he's an eccentric science guy, so whatever, he can do what he will. But yeah, you can follow him on Twitter /X there at 49ers Cap, and just look up Jason Hurley. And you can also find him at 49erscap.com. Again, a fabulous resource for if you want to stay up to date on the 49ers Cap and everything there. But thank you all so much for sticking with us and sticking through the show. And we will be coming back to you on Monday morning. Hopefully, Adam Marina will be joining us once again. And we're going to start really looking into the free agency frenzy. We hopefully, the legal tampering period is beginning over the weekend, and we're going to start hearing some things that are rushing in. And we'll see where the 49ers are going to shake out. Last year, I remember Adam and I, we recorded an episode. We weren't going live when we were doing the podcast last year. We recorded an episode in the morning. And in that episode, we were talking about, we just don't expect the 49ers to be really active. We don't really expect anything, blah, 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 blah. And then like an hour after we recorded it and I was about to publish it, it was announced the 49ers signed Javon Hargrave. And so we'll see what happens. It'll be an interesting weekend, and we may be coming to you Monday night. We'll see what the news kind of lays out there. But anyways, until next time, y'all are great. Stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, go Niners.